Good evening, everyone. It is now 6 o'clock, and I want to welcome everyone to the Richland County Council regular session for April 19th, 2022. This meeting will now come to order. First item on the agenda is item 1A, which is the roll call. Madam Clerk, if you would please take the roll.
Malinowski.
Here.
Hugh.
Here.
McBride.
Here.
Livingston.
Here.
Teratio. Walker.
Here.
Barron.
Here.
Walker.
Present.
Mackey.
Here.
English.
Present.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 2, which is the invocation. And that will be presented by the Honorable Jessica Mackey. Ms. Mackey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, I have the honor of recognizing Reverend Adam China. If you would come forward, please, to deliver the invocation this evening.
Thanks for the blessings of another day. We thank you for this moment. We thank you for loving us and for keeping us. Thank you for providing for us. We give you thanks even for this Easter season when we come together in your name. Lord, we thank you for this gathering. We thank you for this council. We thank you for the citizens of Richland County. We pray now, Lord, that your presence would rest upon our hearts. We pray, Lord, for our elected officials, that they will do what is pleasing in your sight and what is in the best interest of all of your people. So guide their hearts, their minds, and Lord, again, keep your arms of protection around the citizens, not only of this county, but this state, of this nation, and of this world. Let your peace rain down and let our hearts come together, that we be in tune with you and within tune with one another. We pray this prayer in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend China, for that inspirational word. Next item on the agenda is item 4, approval of the minutes, specifically item 4A, which is the regular session from April 5th, 2022. Any changes, additions, or deletions to approval of the minutes?
I move for approval, Mr. Chair.
Second.
It's been moved to properly second. Is there any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Hugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 5, which is adoption of the agenda. Any changes, additions, deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair.
You recognize Mr. Wright?
Yes, just number 6, 6B specifically, that is not an executive session item. It is an item for the report, but it's not executive session.
But instead, that would just be an item that we'll just discuss
Regular open session.
in regular open session.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't really view that as an amendment to the agenda, but any amendments or changes? Okay, there being none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Move to properly second. There any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Hugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton. Motion approved.
And next item on the agenda is item 6, which is the report of the county attorney. And Mr. Wright, you are recognized.
Yes, there are 2 items for executive session, 6A, Pine View Park contractual matters, and 6C, Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. 6B, not executive session, but it is an item that needs to be addressed. There are certain changes that need to be done to the ordinance that has passed because there are certain dates that won't be realized as they were previously thought to be.
But before we get into that item, I guess I'd like to ask the body, would we prefer to go, well, Mr. Wright, do we have any of the items that are for executive session, items 6A and 6C, do they involve outside counsel this evening?
They do not.
They do not. Okay. So I guess my question for the body is, would we prefer to have a discussion now regarding 6B, which again, it's not an executive session item, but part of the county attorney's report. And then we go into executive session, I guess, later in the meeting with respect to items 6A and 6C.
Mr. Chair,
You recognize Ms. Barron.
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and hear 6B now and go into executive session at the end of the meeting.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Properly second. Any discussion? All right, there being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Terratio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Well, Mr. Wright, you may continue on with respect to item 6B.
Yes, that's regarding the Land Development Code Rewrite Ordinance 21 HR. The issue is that in the ordinance that was passed and section 2 interim procedures A, also in D, there is a date of July 6, 2022. But because there are certain things that haven't gone forward yet or come before this body yet from the Planning Commission, it may need to be amended to say become effective as part of the adoption of the map amendments ordinance instead of having that specific date. So the recommendation is that it be amended in section A, D of section 2, section 3 as well, to change the language, to take out the dates, and section 6, which the final date had as of May 2nd, 2022. So we need to amend those dates to say the effective date of the map amendment adopting ordinance instead of having those specific dates.
Any questions from the body? Any discussion? Mr. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not having those sections in front of me, I really don't know what I know in general what we're talking about, but don't have the specifics. An amendment, sir, will take 3 readings in a public hearing, correct?
That is correct.
Rather than amend the portions of this as you're singling out here, is there any reason that we can't just say our amendment is to revert back to the original code as it was until this all gets sorted out and we follow that? That way, any property owner, individually or as a business that wants to develop, has something to follow. It's the code that we have been following and the map is there and there's no question about it. So until this all gets sorted out, I would make a motion that we amend the current item that Attorney Wright is talking about to state we will revert back to the code as it was prior to this. And when the map is complete and all other items relating to the new land development code, at that point, we can come back and change it.
Malinowski, I would actually second that motion for discussion. You recognize Ms. McBride?
Yes. Could you tell me currently, are we under the the code, the recommendations from the code are the policy of the code that Mr. Malinowski is saying revert to? Are we currently under that code?
What?
I'm trying to find out currently which code we're using.
Stand now,
I'll let Mr. Price speak to that.
Price, you're recognized.
Mr. Button,
Sorry. GNR Price, CP and D Department. We're currently operating on our current land development code, as far as from a development standpoint. So we're currently operating on our current code.
Say current code, Mr. Price, are we talking about, the code that we already voted on?
No,
Or are we talking about or tell me which code you're referring to?
the code that was in existence prior to the November 21st.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I got a follow up from Mr. Price and Ms. McBride is done.
All right, you recognize Mr.
So,
Walker.
Mr. Price, just for the sake of clarity, if we pass the motion as presented, it is business as usual for the planning department until such time as we approve the amended and new land development code.
Yes, sir, that would be correct. I think the only thing I would add is that we just make sure we address that any rezonings that come in, because one of the things that we established with the previous adoption of the text was that any rezonings will come in under the newly adopted zoning ordinance. So I believe, along with what Mr. Malinowski is proposing, if we go back to business as usual, that would then allow them to go back and ask for any rezonings that are under our our current operating land development code.
I'll let Mr. Walker.
Point of clarification, please. So business as usual means no blanket rezoning, yet any applications for new zoning are considered under the newly adopted land development rewrite or land development code. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Repeat that one more time, I'm sorry.
So when I say business as usual today, in other words, the impact of Mr. Malinowski's motion is what I'm trying to enumerate here. If this passes, there is no blanket R1 goes to R3, all the various issues that we've been dealing with. Everything stays status quo until such point as which the new land development code is voted on 3 times and has another public hearing, and then is adopted, presumably by this council. But that zoning applications today and moving forward until that same point in time would be considered under the new zoning. That's what I heard. I just want to be clear.
No,
That was what was intended.
I believe that would need to be determined by council. But if we're going to go back to just business as usual, I would assume that we will go back to zoning designations that are under our, the previous zoning ordinance.
All right, good. That's where I wanted to get. And as a follow-up to that, Mr. Chair, if I may, how does that clog up or bemuddle the existing pipeline? Do we have people that would be called in this tweener space of they've submitted for rezoning, so you're currently reviewing it under some set of circumstances, whereas this would revert them back to another set, causing a resubmittal of rezoning? Can you just speak to the operational efficiency? Can we maintain operational efficiency under the structure of this motion?
We could.
Okay,
currently, we have a few applicants that have submitted applications for rezoning under the ordinance that was adopted in November. We can actually make contact with them and find an equivalent zoning under our previous code and allow them to continue to proceed on with that request.
Thank you. You've answered my question. Thanks.
Ms. Barron, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Price, what does concern me, and we have rezoning conversations quite frequently as District 7 is fast growing. And so I am concerned when we talk about rezoning, when we look at rezoning and these rezoning applications that are coming forth, I just want to be real clear that we are not saying that even the rezoning is going under the new, or is it coming? And I guess I want to know that this motion is going to say whatever we voted on in November, we're not dealing with until planning commission get something that's solid, that, that the body that's palatable to the body, or, I don't want piece of the new and a piece of the old, either we're new or we're old. Which one is it?
Yeah. And I think I would just ask that council be establish which way you proceed. If you want to go back, as we stated, as business as usual, then we would just be dealing strictly with what was in our previous zoning ordinance. If you want to just use the zoning designations on the one in November, that would be something that y'all would need to state, and that's what we would go by.
Thank you.
I'll defer to Councilwoman McBride and ask my question after that.
Mr. Pugh wanted to speak. So, Mr. Pugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Price, I just have one question. Do we currently have developers preparing land and expectations for the new code to be passed?
We do. We've met with a number of developers, and they've looked at what was proposed by staff, and so some of them they were waiting to see what council ultimately would decide upon with the remapping.
But my question is, are they currently prepping land in hopes that this ordinance will be passed?
No, sir. I don't know of anybody, because normally you wouldn't go through that exercise unless you know that you have the zoning in place that would allow that use.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Rod, you're recognized.
My comments are follow up to Mr. Pugh's now. So currently, forget everything else said. Currently, if a zoning application comes in, forget all the discussions that we've had so far. What would you do?
Well, currently, it's a good question. All right, so currently we, as part of the ordinance that was adopted in November, it was stated that any zonings that came in would have to go by the newly adopted land development code. So we do have a few of those that have come in that will be scheduled to go before the planning commission. What we would do, just based on the decisions of council, is we would then go, if it's decided to go back to the original land development code that we were operating under and use those zoning designations, we would have a conversation with them, find a similar zoning to their request, and ask them if they would like to proceed on with the old zoning designations to try to establish their use, or they can decide to wait until we've followed through with the process for the new land development code.
So I was under the impression that Mr. Malinowski's motion was to revert back to what we are currently doing.
Yes.
Or what we are currently doing.
Mr. Malinowski.
Yeah, no, Councilwoman McBride, the motion is that we go back to what we were doing prior to this November new code taking place, which is what we're referring to as the business as usual, what it used to be.
Because it hasn't really taken place. That's why. That's the confusion. Okay.
Remember, it was voted on to move forward with that.
Okay. I don't want to muddy up the water anymore.
You're recognized.
Thank you. I wanted to wait for Ms. McBride for a reason because I thought she might ask part of my question, and she did. So, Mr. Price, I have two questions. And again, I'm just trying to be clear that I understand all of the implications of what this motion would mean. So Ms. McBride's question to you was, what would happen if someone submitted a zoning application if we pass this? My question is, just so that I'm clear, what would happen if there was a property owner, say I've got a cousin who's building a house on Mary Newton Lane that's zoned, rural. And so if he were to come to the county and we pass this motion, or no, actually right now, today, because he wanted to build a house on that property, he would build his house according to the previous rural designation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So is it fair to say that the implications of Mr. Malinowski's motion are exclusively experienced as it relates to zoning and rezoning requests and not to current homeowners or landowners trying to build a house?
You can rephrase that, ma'am.
So right now, someone that's building a home is building according to our previous code. Is that correct?
correct.
So then passing Mr. Malinowski's motion wouldn't affect someone that's doing that. It would only affect someone that was coming with a rezoning request. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Wright.
and if the desire of the council is to basically revert back to how things were prior to the passage of the ordinance in November, probably what you want to do is ask that the November ordinance be rescinded. So if we rescind it, then we're back as we were before November. But that still takes 3 readings, either way.
Right, if I understand you correctly, we would need to rescind the, is that what I'm hearing you say, rescind the ordinance that council passed in November?
Correct. And that would take you back to how you were prior to November. And whenever you pass the new rewrite, you can change it. You can pass that, but even this rescission would take 3 readings.
Because what I'm hearing from Mr. Price, based on his answer to Ms. Newton's question, is that we're pretty much operating as business as usual currently. That's what I thought I heard him say.
Yes.
Is that
From a development standpoint, we're operating as usual. Again, for any rezonings that come in would have to be under our new land development code. That's really the only change. But as Councilwoman Newton stated, if your property is zoned RSLD now, you can develop under RSLD standards or general commercial. Nothing has changed as far as how you develop the site because you're under the former land development code.
Mr. Livison, you recognized?
Mr. Price, what happens if we decide that someone who is applying for a rezoning now has an option to do it under the current plan or the previous one before our ordinance? What happens if they had a choice to do either one? How does that affect what you all do in office?
You mean based on the decision of council tonight?
Oh. What I'm saying is, let's say, for example, someone is given an option, they can apply under the current one based on the ordinance that we passed, or before the ordinance was passed. They had a choice to do either one.
The difference would be is if they applied for what was our former land development code under any of those zoning designations, they would be able to develop as such. If they were to apply for one of our newer, one of the new land development code districts that were adopted as of November of last year, then they would not be able to proceed with developing under those standards because we haven't fully adopted the code and the mapping that goes with it. So we're kind of be on hold. They almost have like an overlay over it. So let's say, for example, you have a property zone rule, which is under our old code, and they came in and rezoned their property to R5, just picking one. I guess unless the legal has a different opinion on this, essentially they could still develop under that former code, which would be rule, or they can wait and develop under the R5, R6 zoning designation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Price, 2 questions. First, we talked about if this motion were to pass or a variant of that motion, what the implications would be to zoning. For my information, are there any other implications that we need to be aware of if we were to make this change?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then from your perspective, because we've talked about what would happen, from your perspective, what do you see as the advantages or disadvantages as it relates to the county in terms of taking this action?
I believe you could argue one of the advantages would be, as we go back to last year, I believe one of the main objectives of all of council was to ensure that all of the citizens had some information and some knowledge of the text part that what we're doing. I think if we go back, I think a lot of the citizens have had a chance to look at the new land development code and have a better understanding of what it entails. And so I think that we would have more dialogue and they would have a better understanding. That would be one of the benefits to it. Kind of thinking on the negative side, of we would have to go back, because if I'm hearing the Attorney Wright correct, if we rescind the ordinance and we start over, then we're going to go back to the Planning Commission, I will assume, and have them go over this and then forward their recommendations to council. And I think I wouldn't call it negative, but we will still probably have to go back through the notification process, which may require us to, again, provide mail outs to all of the citizens about the map amendment.
One more follow-up, if I could. I don't know if this is for Mr. Price or Mr. Wright, but we talked about potentially rescinding the previous ordinance. When you look at the objectives of Mr. Malinowski's motion, is the rescinding option the only option to achieve that, or is there another option that we haven't discussed that would achieve the intent of his motion?
Right. Well, I think the two options is basically either rescind the ordinance that was passed in November, or, as I originally said, just change the dates, because the problem now, it has to be a change because the dates that certain things are supposed to happen are like May 2022 and July 2022, which we know are not going to be met. So those dates have to be changed, or it be rescinded. Depends on what y'all want to do. The only thing the dates do, if we change the dates, everything will remain as is. The same process you're going through. It's just that instead of saying that this will be done by May 2nd, 2022 or July 6th, 2022, it will take place once the map amendment is actually approved. So that's the difference. So either you can just change the dates so that you won't be restricted by, say, hey, this has to happen by May 2nd or by July 6th, or you can rescind it altogether. So those are basically the two choices.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, it looks like Mr. Jensen might be also trying to offer an opinion.
Jensen, you're recognized. Thank you, Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Ms. Newton, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Jensen, Assistant Community. Boy, I'm going back in the old days. Assistant County Administrator. Very briefly, Mr. Price just passed me a copy of the red lines for what is being proposed. And essentially what we are proposing is just to move from a fixed date to an open-ended date for adoption, or for implementation is a better word, of the ordinance. That's all we're asking for tonight. So effectively, the original adopting language said we will have this done by this date. We have since met with community advocates, we've met with property owners, we've met with various folks, and they've said to us, we want more discussion and we need more time. And so that's all we're saying today, is that we're recommending don't rescind the work we've done, just make an open-ended implementation date so that when the Planning Commission is ready to come back to you with their recommendation and when the council is ready to adopt it, that is when it goes into effect. So that is all we're asking tonight.
Mr. Chair.
Before I get to you, Mr. Malinowski, Ms. Barron's had a hand up for a while. So Ms. Barron, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to do my best to phrase this in a question without going on a tangent. And that is, from day one, this process has seemed somewhat convoluted. It seems very hard to follow. And it seems like, and I guess this is the question that I have for you, Mr. Price, is the process that we are taking, where we had to adopt the text first and now we're adopting the map, do we have to do it that way? Because I think I've even said that before. It just seems like if I had the text and I had the map hand in hand, I can look and try to make sense of it. Now we're going back on something that we voted on in November and saying, okay, the map looks like this and here's the text, and we're trying to marry them, but somewhere along the lines, it seems something has gotten confused. And I get Mr. Jensen. I think an open-ended date would be great so that we can continue to flesh this out a little bit more. But I'm still back to the process, the way that we came here. Is there a better route that we can take now that we have a spotlight on this? Is it a better route that we can take where we can work at both of them together for it to make sense?
That question's for you, Mr. Price.
I believe we're at the point now where that's what we're doing. I think that, we had to have the text in place so everyone would know exactly what it is we're doing. So I understand what you're trying to put them together. I think probably would have caused more confusion. But now that everyone kind of has an idea of the zoning designations, it's a little easier for them to go back to the specific text and look, how does that specific zoning relate to me? I think that this process that we're doing now, again, kind of leaving an open-ended date. Again, it allows for more additional meetings, more discussion. Again, our planning commission is having work sessions to look at some of the text. And so in some way, they are kind of tying themselves together. So that when it comes to you, the next time you will see both, you'll be able to kind of marry them together versus, I think before, I think there was just a misunderstanding or just a lack of knowledge as to what was actually in the land development code previously.
And I have one follow-up, Mr. Chair. I don't know that it's a lack of misunderstanding or is it perhaps that it wasn't presented, and this is just my opinion, I don't think that it was presented in the best manner, because now we're back to months later doing something that we could have done at the beginning. And it seems like a great idea now because everybody's in an uproar, but it seems like we could have started there. And that you don't have to comment on that, but I just, as we move forward with looking at processes and improving our plans, I wish that, we would put the most thoughtful method up front. And then so that because now it feels like we've lost a lot of time. And now we're double working ourselves. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, Ms. Barron. Malski, then Mr. Livingston, and then Mr. Pugh.
Hey, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, ACA Jensen, to move to an open-ended date still leaves what was approved this past November in place, which puts people in limbo that are trying to possibly develop a piece of property, be it a single individual or multi-employee development firm. By removing that and reverting back to what we had in place before November, or rescinding what was done as was suggested to do, it allows anybody to move forward with any type of rezoning they would like to request on any piece of property in the county. And that's what I'm trying to do, is make it so that we're not putting people in this limbo status and saying, okay, we don't know when we're going to finish it, but we're going to put you in the queue for eventually getting a potential of your property that you want being able to be developed at the new zoning. We don't know when that will be. There are several motions that this council has already approved that we're waiting for information on as well before we should be moving forward with it, to make sure everything's done in a proper, timely manner. And therefore, I'm going to stick with my motion and shorten it up using the attorney's word and for a rescission of what was done in November.
It's like to me, Mr. You're trying to amend your motion?
The same motion, using one word instead of all those words.
Well, before I get to Mr. Livingston, I believe Mr. Jensen, there was something you wanted to say. You kind of had your finger raised.
Thank you, Mr.
There was something
Chair.
you wanted to respond to, Mr. Livingston, that Mr. Malinowski mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Jensen, ACA. Very briefly, the question was asked previously, what are the upsides and the downsides of the two options? The upside, or let's start with the downside. The downside of rescinding is that you go back to square one and you go back and you have to hold all the public hearings and everything that you just went through for the last 5 years or so since the comp plan was adopted. That's the downside. And so you've lost all of the time and money you've invested over the last 5 years. The upside, or the positive side of doing this, is that effectively you've given the Planning Commission and council the council has given the Planning Commission and the public direction as to what it wants seen done, in the effect that you're saying, staff, we want you to continue to accept applications and to process them under the existing code, because the adopted code in November has not gone into effect yet. It is not the law of the land in that sense, because until it's effective, it's not the code. And so that's what that's what legal counsel, I think, was saying earlier, is that until we have an adoption date and it's effective, we have to use our current existing code. And so if the direction of council is staff continue to accept applications and to process them under the existing code, which is the code that we've been using for the last, 20 years, however long it's been here in the county, then while this other process moves forward, fantastic. That's how we did it in Reno. That's how I did it in Bountiful. Every community I've ever worked in, until it was effective, you operated under the code that was on the books. And if that's what council wants us to do, boom, we can do it. No problem.
Livingston, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Jensen pretty much said exactly what I wanted to say, and because it's not going to make a whole lot of sense to try to rescind what we've done again, like you're saying, to have to start all over again. My recommendation is that we amend the current ordinance to allow someone to request zoning under the previous ordinance prior to November, so that way those folks can move forward. So my motion, I'd like to offer a substitute motion that we amend the ordinance that we passed in November, but we would allow someone to request a zoning under the previous ordinance prior to November, prior to the one that's in effect now.
Okay, then.
That's an amendment, yes. It requires a second.
On the amendment, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? All right. Mr. Malinowski, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would take deference with Mr. Jensen's comment on for the last 5 years that council has been holding public hearings. We all know we can have a public hearing unless this council approves more than one, and usually it goes to 2. So there haven't been public hearing after public hearing for 5 years. Staff, even in the beginning, said they've been working with a consultant for the last 2.5 years. So I don't know where the 5-year figure is coming from, because this council has not been receiving information for the last 5 years about this matter. And that's why we're where we are right now, because all this has been taking place somewhere behind the scenes, with council ultimately being told, here's where we're going, as staff decided to come to some conclusions that they felt was best for us to finally hear. Because I know probably 10 years ago, I'm going to say, I was asking staff about some changes in a couple of the codes, and I was told, we're rewriting the code. When we rewrite it, we'll look into that. To this very day, that still isn't in the new rewritten code. And what was I told? Oh, after we pass this new code, then you can make a motion to have that changed also. So I'm not so sure where we are with this, other than the fact I think we need to go back to square one. I don't think there's that much cost or expense. We still have what we've been given. I don't think we're going to hire anybody else right now to move forward with anything else. I think we need to sort out the mess that's been made. And once we do that, then we can move forward. It's 3 readings in a public hearing, no matter which one you put out there. And so that's why I'm sticking with my motion. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question about Mr. Livingston's motion, and that is, I'm going back to where I've always started. how does that impact rezoning? Are we saying rezone for even with rezoning? Because earlier, Mr. Price stated that if we go back to using everything that we had as far as we haven't done anything new or except for with rezoning. That's what I heard. So we still are in two worlds.
All right, so Mr. Jensen, can either one of you speak to Ms. Barron's question?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, again, Eric Jensen, Assistant County Administrator. So the recommendation of staff is that we amend the dates only in the existing ordinance language so that it's an open-ended date and that effectively everything that's existing in the code, in other words, not the language that was adopted in November, but everything that's existing and currently in operation continues to go in operation until such time that the ordinance becomes effective. And the ordinance would become effective when the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to council on the zoning map and the council adopts it. And so until then, it's one world, it's the existing code.
And to answer your question, Ms. Barron?
I just need to hear that you are also including rezoning in that because that was not what was stated earlier.
That's why I said that answered your question.
Yeah, so I just need to know that we're talking about everything, including rezoning.
If that's the council's direction, then that is what we will do.
That's not my question.
No, so but the answer is if your motion tonight says that, then that is what we will do.
But then I guess
Mr. Livingston's motion, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Mr. Livingston's motion did.
That is the intent of my motion.
That was his motion.
Okay, that's that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and you recognize Ms. McBride.
Yeah, that was my comment that Mr. Livingston's motion was the same as what Mr. Jensen is saying, and it provides us an amended dates, it's open-ended, and we'll follow the existing ordinance, which covers everything. And then whatever changes are necessary, we can still make those changes and nothing else changes.
Any further discussion or questions? Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
Super fast. Does this amendment also require 3 readings in a public hearing?
It does.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Livingston.
Can you clarify the question?
Livingston, would you please restate the motion?
Motion, we just simply amend the ordinance that was passed in November to allow someone to request rezoning under the previous ordinance. Therefore, they can move forward. They don't have to, right now, remember they have to do it under the new ordinance. So that would be no change. Business would be pretty much as usual when it comes to rezoning.
Okay, Mr. Racio, you recognize, Go ahead.
Is there a proposed end date to that? No.
When the ordinance is, the new ordinance is approved or adopted.
Okay.
All right, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski.
Oh.
Hugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
No.
Barron.
No.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Mr. Wright, other than the other, I guess the 2 items, items 6A and 6C, which would be executive session items up for discussion, does that conclude the county attorney's report?
That concludes it.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 7, which is citizens input, specifically item 7A for items on the agenda not requiring a public hearing. Madam Vice Chair, has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We had several folks sign up to speak tonight on the agenda item related to zoning and the land development code. There was previously a public hearing scheduled for this issue. So per county rules, we would not allow folks to speak again on an issue where a public hearing was already held.
Understanding, gather from what you're saying, Madam Vice Chair, that because we've already had a public hearing on this, on this item, that the rules prohibit, public input at this stage.
Yes, Mr. Chair, they do. Folks can sign up, as we just discussed about, there is not a date set yet, but as we continue to discuss the land development code and work to bring it up again. There will be another public hearing held where folks could sign up, but at this point, per the county rules, they would not be able to speak on the issue again.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Next item on the agenda is item 8, also citizens input, specifically item 8A, which must pertain to Richland County matters not on the agenda, items for which a public hearing is required or a public hearing has been scheduled and cannot be addressed at this time.
Mr. Chair, we have 2 individuals that have signed up tonight. The first is Thurman Guess. So, Mr. Guess, if you would state your first and last name along with your address, please.
Yes. Thurman Guess, THURMOND, Guess, GUESS. My address is 3111 Two Notch Road, apartment 124, Columbia, South Carolina, 29204. I was here in February the 15th before you concerning an easement right deed that the county has obtained from 3 individuals that was inappropriate. I had been working with the county and we were going to write a new easement right. Mr. Maloney and Mr. Player was going to coincide and agree to a new deed. Now, we got a letter from the county. The county rejected that. They're not going to do a deed. A lawsuit has been filed against the 3 individuals who brought this matter to Richland County. Richland County has not been sued yet, but there's some language inside there I think that council members should look at. And this was concerning property that my mother and father owned, Arthur and Lola Mae Guess. And in that property, there was 3 persons signed an affidavit that they saw my father and my mother sign. My father had been deceased ever since 1976, and this easement right was done in 1990. So there's no way that my father left his grave and signed this easement right. My mother's signature is not there on that date. The lawsuit has been filed, and all I'm asking and all I'm saying is I thank Mr. Maloney and Mr. Player for trying to work it out. But the county needs to do something. You don't need to be sued because these other people have been sued. It is just right out wrong what we allegedly, it was outright that they didn't do the right thing concerning an easement right. So I just want to say thank you to Mr. Maloney and Mr. Player for trying to work it out. We got a letter from Mr. Brown saying that the county saying that because of the time frame of
That's your 2 minutes, Mr. Guest.
2 years. Okay, thank you
so much.
Thank you too.
Yes.
Next, we have is Steve Kreitmeyer.
Close enough.
All right. If you would, state your first and last name and definitely spell that for the record, please, along with your address. And you have 2 minutes, sir.
All right. Steve Kreitmeyer. It's Krietemeyer. I live at 109 Rose Creek Lane. 29229 is the zip code. As a Richland County resident, a member of a congregation participating in more justice, I'm troubled by the scarcity of affordable housing in the county. Nearly half of renters in Richland County pay more than a third of their income for rent and utilities, meaning that for many of them, a one-time emergency can start them down a path towards eviction. It is hard to build stable families without stable housing. When families have to choose between paying for food, housing, medicine, or other necessities, it often plays out in a child's poor educational performance or in unmet healthcare needs within the family. While communities of faith are called to respond in mercy, we are also called to seek changes within our institutions to address the problems at their root. That is why we are requesting a housing trust fund that has dedicated funding and the flexibility needed to address the complex issues that underlie our community's housing crisis. This is a problem that's been building for decades. Housing trust funds are working to address these problems in Greenville and Charlotte, and in over 750 communities across the nation. please consider funding a housing trust fund that is structured to effectively address Richland County's housing needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that concludes individuals that signed up to speak tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Next item on the agenda is item 9, which is the report of the county administrator. Mr. Brown, you're recognized.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. There is no report for this particular council meeting.
Brown.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item 10, report of the clerk of council. Madam Clerk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Walker. No reports at this time.
Next item on the agenda is item 11, which is the report of the chair. And at this time, the chair does not have any updates or announcements for the body. Item 12, which is second reading items. Item 12A, specifically authorizing the execution and delivery of a fee in lieu of ad valorem taxes agreement by and between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Gamecock to provide for payment of a fee in lieu of taxes and other related matters. At this time, I entertain a motion.
Move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It's moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski. Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 12B, authorize the execution and delivery of a fee in lieu of ad valorem taxes by, agreement rather, by and between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Laser to provide for payment of a fee in lieu of taxes and other related matters. At this time, I entertain a motion.
Move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Move to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English. Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 12C, which is authorizing the execution and delivery of a fee in lieu of ad valorem taxes and incentive agreement by and between Richland County, South Carolina, and Project Vanguard to provide for payment of a fee in lieu of taxes, authorizing certain infrastructure credits, the conveyance of certain real property to Project Vanguard, and other related matters. At this time, I entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 13, report of the Economic Development Committee that will be provided by the Honorable Paul Livingston. Mr. Livingston, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first item is 13A, a resolution acknowledging the acquisition of the Carolina Pines Industrial 1 LLC by CH Carolina Pines LLC and consenting to the transfer of fee in lieu of tax agreement with Richland County and Carolina Pines. The committee's recommendation is for approval for that particular that transfer. It doesn't change any terms or conditions as it relates to the agreement.
Heard the recommendation of the committee. Any discussion or questions? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski. Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Livingston, you recognized.
That brings item 13B. That's a resolution approving the assignment of Exeter Jenkins Brothers 2020 LLC, all the rights, interests, and obligations of Mid-South 1080 Jenkins Brothers LLC, Exeter 180 Jenkins Brother, under that certain fee agreement between Mid-South and Richland County, South Carolina, authorizing county execution and delivery of an assignment, assumption of fee and agreement. This is very similar to the first one. We just simply transferring the terms of the agreement.
Further
Recommendation for approval.
You've heard the recommendation of the committee. Is there any discussion or questions? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Madam Chair, I'm recusing myself from this vote due to my parent company representing this company.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Liston, you recognized.
It's item 13C, authorizing the task order number 1 under the master agreement between Richland County and Thompson Hut Engineering. Committee's recommend approval.
The recommendation of the committee, any discussion or questions? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, that completes.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston, and Mr. Walker, you recognize. Mr. Joe Walker.
I think there's some time sensitivity associated with some of these items, so I'd move for reconsideration of items 13A, B, and C.
Second.
Properly second. Okay, any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
No.
Walker,
No.
Mackey,
No.
English,
No.
Newton. Motion fails.
Next item on the agenda is item 14, other items. Item 14A, the Administrator's Office, Palmetto Lifeline request. I entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Properly second. Any discussion? All right, there being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio, Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron, Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
You recognize Ms. Newton.
Thank you. Just as a point of personal privilege, it had nothing to do with my vote. I just want to acknowledge that my beautiful puppy that we just adopted came from Palmetto Lifeline. Thank you.
Recognize Mr. Livingston.
I'd like to move reconsideration for item 14A.
It's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
No.
Walker,
No.
Mackey,
No.
English,
No.
Newton.
No.
Motion fails.
Next item on the agenda is item 14B, conservation land purchase. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda, well, before we proceed, is there a motion for reconsideration necessary?
Second.
All right, it's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston,
No.
Horatio,
No.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron, Walker,
No.
Mackey,
No.
English,
No.
Newton.
No.
Motion fails.
Next item on the agenda is item 14C, vendor
Chair.
selection. Yes.
Can I move for approval for items 14C through F? I move for approval.
All right, and that motion's made by Ms. McBride. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
No.
Barron,
Yes.
O'Walker,
This is a motion for reconsideration, right?
no, for
Yeah.
approval.
Motion for approval, okay. Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Chair, I move for reconsideration for items 14C through F.
Second.
Move to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh.
No.
McBride,
No.
Livingston, Teratio,
No.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
No.
O'Walker,
No.
Mackey,
No.
English,
No.
Newton.
No.
Motion fails.
Next item on the agenda is item 14G. Is a resolution to appoint and commission Jamal Rashawn Clavon as the code enforcement officer for the proper security, general welfare, and convenience of Richland County. I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Chair,
I'm sorry.
did you say,
I said it's 14G.
oh, is that G supposed to be F? Is that F? Okay.
Well,
I put that in the other motion 14.
I heard you say to.
Yeah. But his name is. Okay. But his name Jamal.
that's correct, yeah. All right. All right, so who made the motion?
Motion to approve item 14G.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It's moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, next item on the agenda is item 14H, and I hope I get the name correct here. So, but a resolution to appoint and commission Kyle Britton Wright as a code enforcement officer for the proper security, general welfare, and convenience of Richland County. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Move properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next item on the agenda is item 15, which is executive session. Item 15A states specifically, after council returns to open session, council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed on an executive session agenda or discuss in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting. And there are the two items from earlier, item 6A and item 6C. Those are items that are up for executive session tonight. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss 6A, Pineview Park contractual matters, and 6C, Albanese Glen Detention Center.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Move to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski, Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Joe Walker, Barron,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, we're now in executive session.
Move to come out of executive session.
All right.
Second.
That's been moved to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski. Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, we went into executive session for items that would have been 6A, the Pine View Park contractual matters, and 6C, that was Glen Detention Center. We went into executive session and received those items as information, and no action was taken. Next item on the agenda is item 16, which is the motion period. Mr. Malinowski, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to have a vote to reconsider item number 6B, because I'm not so sure that everybody understood exactly what the motions were in front of us.
Second.
Properly second. I believe that's non-debatable. So, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
What is 6?
6B is Land Development Code rewrite ordinance.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
No.
Livingston.
Yes.
Teratio.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm gonna.
No. No. Thank you. No.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Paul Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
No.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Recognize Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like Attorney Wright to explain the difference in the two motions, if he would, please, which was the motion that I made, which was to, at this point in time, rescind the November Land Development Code that was passed back in November of last year by this council, and the one that Councilman Livingston made, which was to put the November one into an indefinite hold until other matters get taken care of at the staff level. My understanding is that Mr. Livingston keeps the actual November code in place until an uncertain date in the future, but it still remains in place, and that individuals have the option to apply for rezoning under the old code, or they can apply under the new code and wait, because ultimately that new code, according to the staff, would be approved. And the motion I made is that they can only apply under the old code, because we don't know what will happen with the new code moving forward if we rescind it at this point in time, so that we can make sure we get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed to determine, do we want to move forward with the new code in Word and in map?
I believe that's correct. What your motion was to rescind so that everything goes back to pre-November.
Right.
With Mr. Livingston's amendment, what that does is that it leaves it open-ended. The ordinance from November stays in place, but the date is open-ended instead of the specific dates that were not going to be met. And it also allows individuals to either use the original pre-November code or to file under the new and but wait, have it held off and wait till the new code is approved.
And either way, whatever gets passed tonight takes 3 readings and a public hearing. And then what this council decides moving forward, the next time will still take 3 readings and a public hearing, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
You recognize Mr. Livingston.
So my motion would mean that you don't necessarily have to do 3 readings and a public hearing if this council decides to move forward with a new ordinance, because you're not getting rid of it. You know, you're just amending it. So, and you also still have an option at any point in time to just completely go back to the new one. You could do that on the next reading or whatever you want to do it. That doesn't stop you from saying at any point in time you want to just get rid of the new ordinance. But why get rid of it now when we're still looking at it and so forth, and going back and rescinding it? You have absolutely nothing. You automatically have to start everything over. But this way, you can have options to do either one.
Recognize Mr. Malinowski.
The reason that I say just get rid of it is because by leaving it in place, people may be applying saying, I want to wait for the new code to be passed. And we don't know how long it will take for it to be passed, if it will be passed. So therefore, we should allow people to just continue every single day to move on with whatever development or rezoning requests they want to do and move forward now today and not delay them. And therefore, we should rescind that code because we're not sure if we want to, from everything I'm seeing with the maps and the problems of it, I'm not so sure that we are going to move forward with it at this point in time. And as I said before, when staff came forward and said, you have to pass the words before we can do the map, here's where we are now because of that. It's rather than make it one complete package, we're paying the price of it and hearing a whole lot of negative from constituents, from some council members as well. I don't think it was done properly. And that's why I'm saying, let's go back where we were, start over, and let the chips fall where they may at the end of the time of all the responses that staff will be giving us moving forward.
Livingston?
And I'd rather my constituents have the option to consider both. And I think that's what my amendment does.
I know mine would rather have the old one, so.
Ms. McBride recognized.
And Malinowski's amendment would allow, in Mr. Livingston's amendment, the constituents still would be able to go back if they chose to, if we passed it. So I see it, part of what you want, Mr. Malinowski, is covered in Mr. Livingston's amendment.
But there's also part that's in Mr. Livingston's that keeps the old one that we passed that I personally and others I know do not feel we should have at this point in time until it's all hashed out.
Then Mr. Livingston's amendment will allow some of the issues that were discussed when they did part of the land development code and then the zoning would allow us to look at both of them now. So
still look at both of them now.
Aaron,
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but I just still have just some challenges with where we currently are. And I understand that we can stop at any point and say, you know what, this is not working. But I don't think that we need to delay saying, stop, it's not working. It's not working. It's not working. And even when I talked to Mr. Price tonight, I wish he was here. So, you know, he also agrees that there are some challenges that we've experienced that we, you know, hindsight, and his words, hindsight is 2020. And so, yes, if hindsight is 2020, let's put a pin in this and do it right. Do it right now. And I'm not certain that, you know, saying, let's keep moving forward. And then we continue to move forward. And then a month later, we say, you know what? It's still not working. So I just have some concerns about it.
Thank you. You reckon it?
Thank you, Chair. I guess I want to say, you know, to Mr. Livingston's motion, it gives us the ability to do both. I know that we've all heard from a lot of citizens that aren't happy with some of the changes, but I know that I've heard from some of my constituents that want some of these changes to occur so that it can stop what is being allowed in our current zoning. And so they're happy to see some of these changes. And so by going completely back, we're also not making them happy because it allows some developers, some people to continue doing some stuff that is old in this current land code. And so I know this process is not easy. We are going to have to hear it. We're in the midst of it right now, but I don't think we can completely go back and start over. We're in the midst of it. It's bad. We got to figure out how to get through it. But completing like a whole reset to me is not an option for us. We got to be leaders right now and keep moving forward and figure out hearing the concerns and coming up with solutions.
Thank you, Ms. English, you recognize, and then Ms. Newton.
Question regarding time frame. I know when we say start all over, is that a year from now? Versus I know we say open-ended could take up to a year, but when we say start all over, what time frame is that?
As far as the procedure, which I can tell you about, and I just wanted to make sure that if anybody had any questions, that because I just looked at the ordinance, and no matter what we do, if we change it, which I think we have to at this point because there are specific dates in the ordinance that was passed that aren't going to be met. Any amendment or repeal is going to take 3 readings and a public hearing because according to the code, section 2-47, no ordinance, regulation, resolution, or action of the council enacted pursuant to this division may be amended or repealed except by the same formal procedure and requirements as provided for the enactment thereof. So if it took 3 readings and a public hearing to enact, it will take 3 readings and a public hearing to amend or repeal.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Livingston.
If I recall, this motion may not be proper before us because Mr. Malinowski made the motion and he was not on the prevailing side.
Mr. Malinowski? I said, do you have a response to Mr. Livingston's assertion?
I'll leave you.
I believe that to be correct, but
I concur.
Okay. So with that in mind, let's move to the next item on the agenda, which is item 17. I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
All right, it's properly second. That matter is non-debatable. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Malinowski,
No.
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston, Horatio,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved to adjourn.